Hello, I'm B.J. Glover, Interim Vice President of University Culture at OBU. As part of our celebration of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, I had the distinct privilege of interviewing one of Dr. King's contemporaries, a man who is in his own right a living legend among us. Dr. Henderson is a serial pioneer with many firsts to his credit. He was the first black professor in Oklahoma to receive a distinguished professorship, 4 of them in fact. He was the first black professor to create a degree-granting college on the Norman campus at the University of Oklahoma. And he was the first black professor at the University of Oklahoma to be dean of a degree-granting college, in his case, Human Relations, which he chaired for 20 years. Dr. Henderson was a civil rights pioneer in higher education in Oklahoma, and he's won more awards and honors than any other professor at the university. He, along with his wife Barbara, is a community organizer and activist, and he's able to bridge the gap between theory and application when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and justice. Dr. Henderson is certainly an Oklahoma treasure, having been inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, but he is renowned throughout the nation and internationally as well. He's written more than 30 books, and although he retired from the University of Oklahoma in 2006, he's still teaching and still very busy. So Dr. Henderson fit us into his busy schedule to talk about his relationship with Dr. Martin Luther King and the impact of that relationship on his life and work. He shares with us some lessons learned from his life experiences, and he issues a call to each of us to continue the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. So now I invite you to listen in on my conversation with Dr. George Henderson, Human Relations founder and Professor Emeritus at the University of Oklahoma. So, Dr. Henderson, thank you so much for agreeing to visit with me today. You know, the last time I had a chance to interview you was 25 or 30 years ago, and it's as big a thrill for me today as it was then.
It's mutual. I think I was 25 at the time.
Yes, we were both young then. But listen, so I want to talk today both about Dr. Martin Luther King and about you, about the intersections in your two lives and kind of the impact that your relationship with him has had on your life and on your work. Now, just like Dr. King, you have been a pioneer. You have been the first black person to do many, many things. And so I want to try to capture some of those things today in your personal life and in your professional life. So the very first thing I have to say, because you know I know many, many stories about you, and there's one you must tell now. It's related to the fact that we're sitting in this house. This is the very house that you and your wife Barbara bought. I think it was in 1967 when you were the
Absolutely.
first black family to buy a home. I think it was not only in this neighborhood, but in Norman. So tell us the story about what happened when you guys bought this house and what happened to the realtor who sold it to you.
Oh my goodness! You talk about testing one's faith and beliefs. I was naive. I knew that this was not a very warm place for black people, Negroes, colored, what do you want to call us at that time. But hey, I'm in Detroit. I'm involved in the civil rights movement. I'm marching up and down streets, and so I flew to Oklahoma. This place, it was not our first choice. It was not even our second choice. And then it dawned on me, this is a place where really black people are not wanted. The realtors, and I need to start my story with the realtors. Sam and Sally Matthews and Moki Webb had a real estate company. And the norm in Norman at that time was that no realtors would sell a house to a black family. They did. And let me just say, so the story is complete. By violating that norm, within 3 or 4 years, they lost their business, and they lost some pseudo friends. You can never lose real friends. And they were called lots of nasty things. That's the other side of it. Most people don't know. For every minority group person who indeed comes into a previously all-white place, if it's successful, if it lasts, it's because of the assistance of someone who was already there, a white person. They were here. And I asked Sam Matthews, I said, why did you do that? Sam said, George, you know, I'm a devout Christian. He said, losing our business was a small price to pay. If we had denied you that house, I would have, in fact, disavowed in my behavior all that I was taught. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then he said, and I still believe that God is love. So now, that's one side of it. Barbara came 2 weeks before I did because I had to honor my contract at the Detroit Public Schools. I was assistant to the superintendent then. She moved in and settled in, and when I came, that's when Norman showed us really what some of the people thought about us. Try bringing a family of 7 children, a wife, and a mother-in-law to an unfriendly place, unfriendly based on many of the individuals. I won't say most or all. Well, you wake up in the morning, as I did, and you notice that there's garbage on your lawn. I woke up to more mornings that I want to really recount and remove the garbage so that my kids wouldn't have to see that. My car was egged. Police officers would stop me and ask me, especially at night, where are you in this neighborhood? And I would say, I live there, and they would follow me in the vehicle until I drove up to the driveway, put the key in the door, and opened the door and closed it. Being harassed by the police and having to answer those questions, and it was worrisome. Obscene phone calls. We were seeing, the kinds of calls that we finally told our children, you will not answer the phones. So we forbade them to answer the phone for about, good gracious, a couple of months. They didn't have to hear that garbage. There was no need for them. People would drive by our house and call us everything except children of God, just shouting out the obscenities and the racial slurs. That's one side of it. There are always at least 2 sides and maybe more of any story. And then there were the good people in this neighborhood who said, welcome, we're glad that you're here. So for the Hendersons, this was the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times is when we found friends and they found us. The worst of the times is when hateful people found us also. How do you navigate that? How do you do this thing? You know, as I said, I'd been involved in the civil rights movement. I'm accustomed to having people call me names and threaten to kill me and the other things. But my family? I thought, I have unintentionally brought my family into harm's way. But then I also brought the most fearless person that I could think of, my wife. Barbara said, this is our house, this is our community. We will leave when we're ready, not a moment earlier or a moment later. And we're going to be part of this community, and our children are going to be a part of this community. And George, you go and do your job. Now, that's easier said than done. She had she got the obscene calls and all of the other things because I was doing work. I was at the university. Our children attended university school, fortunately, because that was populated by faculty and staff, and a lot of good people in Norman sent their children to this, which was really a private school operated by the university. I guess I'm saying I thought I knew what it meant to be a pioneer in a place. I was an imposter. I was masquerading as a professor of human relations and education who knew about social justice. I never lived it. Norman was my moment of truth. I always tell people when they ask, well, why did you come here? And I said, God sent me. He would have had to. Otherwise, I have to admit that I was certifiably insane. And I don't want to admit that. God sent me. I took a $5,000 pay cut. Now, I told you how many people I'm trying to support. But you know, God also said, you do your work, I'll take care of the other. I always got a consultantship. I was able to write books, and I did a lot of other things to get extra money. So I had no excuse for not doing my work. And that was the story of the Hendersons. It was trial by fire. We lost neighbors, not very many, but we lost neighbors. We found good neighbors, more than we lost. And for the very first time in my life, I could tell people that if you believe in integration, live it. I had never lived it. My family had never lived it before we did here.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of going to work, so here you are at the University of Oklahoma in Norman. Our Black Student Association president wants to know, what was it like for you when you first arrived at the university? How did people respond and react to you?
They knew that this guy from Detroit, who was involved in the civil rights movement, had moved in. And many of them wondered, what kind of trouble is he going to make here? And the students, interestingly, we asked about the students, they expected me to make some good trouble. And they said something that really touched my heart. They said, Dr. Henderson, we're children here, and we want somebody to help us to sort out these things and to mentor us. And I became their mentor. I became their father, their grandfather. I became whatever roles they needed. Our family became their family. So our children became their adopted sisters. Barbara became mama or grandmama. We played those roles. And the students, and they felt good about it because they said, you didn't come to this university just to work at a university, did you? I said, no, I could have done that anywhere. And then I said something off the cuff like, I came for you.
Oh, that just touches my heart to hear you say that.
And it was true.
That is so powerful. I wonder, what do you think it took for you to gain enough credibility to become tenured and to achieve all of those accolades that you have?
Okay, let me put it in perspective. I did the work. I did the work of a professor. I wrote. I was involved in service. And my teaching evaluations were outstanding. I did those things, but that meant that I'm doing basically two jobs. I'm doing the job of a professor, and at night I'm doing the job of a community activist and a mentor of students who are doing community-related things. Lord knows when I slept, I don't. My children will wait up for me sometimes, and I remember the youngest fell asleep at the window waiting for Daddy. What did it take? It took a commitment from me to do two things with the students. I would be their mentor, but they will have to decide what they're going to do, and they have to do the work of organizing and trying to bring about some changes, but I will support them. And the other thing that I require that they do is that you get good grades. You came here for basically one reason, to get an education, get the best education that you can. We'll do the activist stuff, but you get that education first. But then, for some of them, for the leaders, we read about Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Whitney Young Jr., and all of the other individuals. And they learned, they had another class. The class was when we got together and we talked, and they talked about strategies, and they organized the Afro-American Student Union. and Melvin B. Tolson Jr. and Lenny Marie Tolliver, the other black professor, said, "We're your mentors. You're indeed in charge here. You're not tomorrow's leaders. You're today's leaders on this campus. Act like it."
I love that. I love that.
So for the student, what did it take? They say it takes a village to raise a child. We became a black village, and the students helped us to raise them.
That's wonderful. You know, so far you've published 35 books, and I'm going to mention just one of them. It's called Race and the University, that I think pertains particularly to our conversation today. So can you tell me in a nutshell what people will find when they read that book?
They'll find more of George Henderson than I ever intended for a mass audience to find. They'll find a man who, as a child, was born into poverty, and his mother said, "You're going to be the first person in our family to take us out of poverty." That was her wish. You'll find someone who grew up poor, on and off welfare. And I talk about that aspect of my life, but they'll also in the book find out what I was involved in the civil rights movement before I came, and what the students did to have the very first civil rights movement on a predominantly white campus here at the University of Oklahoma, what it was like for them, and the role that I played as a mentor. They'll find life. They'll find stories. They'll find, indeed, an understanding that it was people involved, not theories, not concepts, but what it took for the students. Some of them did not graduate because they didn't do the work, classwork. Some of them didn't get the A's or the B's that they deserved because some professors were trying to punish them. All of them got their dignity, and all of them eventually got their freedom here and equal rights. What did it take? I had to maintain a posture that whenever they looked at me, one student says, "You're always cool, you never get angry." I was seething sometimes inside, but I didn't want them to see me cry. Barbara saw me cry. I didn't want them to see me frustrated and running away. No. But I did have that brave face, the bravado. And then they said, "Well, heck, if Doc can do it, we can do it too." What did it take? It took a lot of love. It took a lot of understanding. See, most of the students who came here came from religious families, as I did when I was growing up. And suffering is redemptive. They did a lot of suffering, but they redeemed themselves also. What did it take? It took us to recreate in this house a family place in a village called us. It took a commitment that all of them, one way or another, had to understand that none of us is free until all of us are free. It wasn't about Doc getting a promotion. It wasn't about Doc staying here. It wasn't about any one of us. It was about all of us. It took so much out of me. You asked that question, and I'm reminded now that I spent more time with other people's children than my own with their permission. My children says, "Daddy, you have work to do. We understand what that work is. You did it in Detroit. We want you to do it here too." But the hours that I spent with the other children, my other children, meant that I didn't spend it with my own. That was a deal. And if I wasn't going to do that, then there was no reason for me to stay here, because I could have gone to any other university that wanted me and not take a pay cut, but get an increase. My calling here wasn't for money. My calling here was to prepare the children to lead us.
And obviously, you've done a good job of that, because there are many, many students of yours who would attest to that today. Now, so let's shift to your relationship with Dr. King. How would you describe your relationship with him and what it was like just being around him? Our athletic director wanted to know that.
Considering that we were really about the same age, I had never in my life seen a young man with the kind of charisma. There were two charismatic people that I got to know. Malcolm X was the other. What was it like to be around Martin? He humanized himself with us. He told raunchy jokes. He liked playing with kids. He admits his shortcomings, but he also had a burning commitment to doing justice and see that it happened. I remember one meeting, and the strategizing for us meant in somebody's house. Before one of the marches, we met at a house. And when we meet at a house, that means all generations are there. They're very young and they're very old. And you're talking about raising money, getting volunteers, and all of the other things. Well, Martin, a Baptist preacher, was almost always late because Martin was on Martin's time. And I remember one time being kind of irritated. All right, we only had now, he was late, we only had maybe an hour to do the other stuff, but he didn't do the other stuff first. He would always stop and play with the kids. He'd ask their names and he'd tickle the babies and he'd hold them. And I asked him, Martin, why did you do that? He said, I give the babies, the young ones, my attention because it reminds me of what this is all about. It's about them. Not us, George. And that was the message that I got. What I was doing was not for me or about me. It was about that next generation and that next generation and next generation of me. What was it like? Charisma is something that you have to feel. When he walked into a room, somehow the atmosphere changed emotionally. You knew he was there. Same with Malcolm. Charisma does that.
Such as you have. So, let me ask you, how has Dr. King's life influenced your interaction with other people?
My father taught me to fight. My mother made me go to church. She said, "You're wrong with the devil 6 days a week. Sunday, we go into church. This is not a discussion. I'm just telling you what you're going to do." I said, "Daddy doesn't go to church." She said, "I'm not your daddy's mama." So my mother made sure that I was listening to the sermons. My father taught me to fight. So I learned how to fight. I could do the gangbanging stuff, but my mother also got me in the church where I heard these words, "God is love." That was a complete sentence. And if God could love a poor, dirty, smelly welfare kid like me, then surely there was some hope for my mother and my father and the other people too. And then the saying, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." It took me a long time for that to sink in and to internalize it. But Martin represented those things. In his role as a leader and a civil rights leader, he personified doing what you say that you are committed to. Only that man could have stopped George from hitting back when people were intent on beating him up. But if you're going to be part of that movement based on love, then you don't return violence with more violence. You don't hate people. You dislike their behaviors and you dislike cruel things, but you never hate another human being. And be prepared to accept abuse, but don't return it. Don't become the kind of person or the thing that you say you detest. It wasn't a cowardly movement. It was the bravest kind of movement that I've ever participated in. To willingly put your body up and let people do with it what you will, but you cannot kill the spirit or the person. The students got that. I got that. They got it from me. And interestingly, they passed it on, some of them, to their children. What was it like? It was like realizing that George Henderson will always have flaws, and there will never be a complete person. There was only one complete person walking around that I knew about, and it wasn't George Henderson. It was my dad or anybody else except that person. But doggone it, if good people can do bad things, then surely bad people can do good things. And my work then is to try to mediate it so we're all trying to do good things.
That's a noble calling there. So So, how have you tried to infuse Dr. King's teachings in your work with students and administrators and faculty and staff?
I believe that I teach best what I live. As an administrator, I gave credit to faculty and staff who were doing their work and doing it well. But also, as an administrator, I chastised those who were falling short and hurting other people. I said, if I'm going to be a leader, then I have to model the kind of leadership. And I said to students, if I'm going to be your mentor, then I have to be a very honest mentor. When you're not doing well and doing what you should do, I will tell you. And then I would always say, and I expect you to do the same with me. My role, my job, my calling. There's a song. Hold on just a little bit longer. Run the race. Hold on. And one day your change will come. I believe that. And I taught students to hold on. There will be adversity. There will be good times. But when there are bad times, don't you become a victim. When there are good times, don't you become a braggart and lord it over others. Oh gosh, I think of these things now. It was never about the money. It was never about the titles. And you talk about my rise in the academe. I moved from associate professor to full professor, distinguished full professor in 2 years. Unheard of at this university and most others, 2 years. I did the work at home, I did the work in the community, I did the work in the classroom. My creator, I don't do many things well. I'm a lousy electrician, and Barbara won't let me mow the grass because I'll mess it up. I don't cook, but I wash dishes and I mop floors and clean toilets. But the gift that God gave me, and coming to the university, I had to find it here. I had to find it here. Was teaching. The very first class that I taught, I knew that I'm a teacher. I would have paid the university to let me teach, and they were paying me. What did I get out of this? Why did I do? I wrote the books because people were saying, well, you know, the black professors, they were so involved in community activities until they never get their scholarship work done. Well, heck, I got my scholarship, but how many books do you need? Well, I kind of got carried away with the book thing. But there was this other thing. Well, you're not involved in, they don't get involved in activities other than those focusing on minorities. Well, I got involved in all kinds of projects and service activities, not only on campus, but off campus. I did what my mother and father said to me when I was in elementary school. Said, son, you're a black child and you'll soon be a black man in a white world. You got to be just a little bit better than the white boy who may not have as much ability as you to prove that you belong. So as a teacher, I've just been doing just a little bit better.
You certainly have. Now, you've told us a little bit about what it was like being involved in the movement. How has that movement changed today?
Oh, gosh. Visually, Martin would have been so happy. When we were doing what we were doing in the civil rights movement, sure, it was black and white and the other people together, but it was mostly black people doing it. Fast forward to where we are now. When you see on film, when you see or when you get involved publicly with the activities, guess what? There are so many white people now until it's not just us, black people. It's about us, all of us. And that all of us, he would be surprised, he would be pleased. So the critical mass has shifted. It was easier, I think, for the people who didn't like us because they were mostly abusing black people. But it really hurts power brokers when they realize that they're killing their children and hurting their children too. That's a horrible price to pay, I think, for one's children to suffer that way, but maybe that's how it has to be. Well, what would Martin think? Martin would say, yes, Yes, and the children are still leading them, because look at the movement today. We are mostly young people. What I hope that they will never lose sight of is that the core of our movement was civility. The core of our movement was treating other people decently. And the core of our movement was this understanding about race. At the end of our day, the only race of any significance is a human race. We're all human beings. None of us are free until all of us are the same way. The movement instilled that in me, and I'm still doing it, and others are doing it too. God, we need it. What would he say today? Martin would say, watching people do it right, not violently, but right, he would say, amen.
Yeah. Well, so we're speaking to OBU today primarily, but we're sharing this with others. But what advice would you have for OBU students based on all that you've seen, experienced, and achieved in your lifetime?
I would tell the students, helping others isn't something that you're going to do when you leave the classroom. When you go to your classes, don't say you're preparing for the real world. That's as real as your world is going to be, unless you're an avatar and come from an out-of-body experience. So practice those things that you say that you're committed to, the civility, the accepting others, and not victimizing other people, not naming, shaming, and blaming people because they're different. Different doesn't mean necessarily that people are bad. Different means that just that. They're not the same. But the common core, I would tell them, is this. We cannot have a successful movement. We cannot have the better students unless you're humane people. And humane people self-actualize for themselves and help others to do it for themselves. I would tell them also what I tell my students. Remember that you have a responsibility to the person next to you, to individuals that you don't know. Get to know them. We are family. There's no us without me, and there's no us without you, and there's no us without all of us. So let's stop pretending that we are a race or an ethnic group. Other people can call those names. Let's be humane human beings.
Amen.
I would tell them, you have a wonderful opportunity here to demonstrate in your classrooms and also in your community through service what helping other people means and what valuing and giving dignity and respect to others is, because you must do it. You will teach best and learn best by what you do. Get it done. I will also tell them this. The sad truth of my existence is this. The children, and now you are the children, you must be the best, you must hone your skills, you must be as knowledgeable as you can, because you are our leaders. You're not tomorrow's leaders, you're today's leaders waiting to take your place. Whatever you do, do it with kindness, do it skillfully and soulfully, do it with love.
Exactly. Now, what words of wisdom would you have for our leadership and faculty?
We are the elders in this village, and the elders should pass on stories of good things that happened at the universities and also the lessons that we learned when we were not so good. I would tell the administrators, for example, that changing a culture must be from the top down. That means you must have adequate training and a commitment to it. I would tell the administrators and all of the other individuals, if you say that you're committed and your policies and procedures say that you're committed to justice, equality, and live it. There ought to be rewards for people doing good things, and there ought to be some kind of punishment for those who are not. What would I tell faculty? Office hours shouldn't just be for a few hours in where you work. Office hours should be in the communities where you live also. You have a sacred trust faculty. Other people have sent their children to you. Think of it like athletics. Almost always when people are recruiting athletes, they tell the parents, I'll take care of them. I'll make sure that they get what they need. Well, faculty, they're sending them to OBU. You're indeed, therefore, the guardians of these young minds. Teach them well. Care for them. Create environments in which they feel safe. Love them if you can. Respect them, you must. Remember them always.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. You know, I think many times people are clueless about the price people pay for success. So I have to ask you, when you consider all that your achievements have cost you, is it worth it?
Yes, 1,000 times, yes. Thousands of times, yes. It was my calling. It was my work. Was it worth it? I've been interviewed more times than I can remember. And almost always when the people come to my office, they see the plaques and the awards, plaques everywhere, things on the floor because I don't have the space for them. I got them at home. They're in storage, and I've got things. And the reporters will usually point to a plaque and say, which of these things do you value most? And I say, none of these things. The highest honor and award that I've ever achieved is being a positive force in the life of a student. Was it worth it? You're doggone right it was worth it. Because you never just reach one kid. Because that kid will then graduate or not graduate, but they'll go out and touch the lives of others. So I have indirectly reached who knows how many. I've tried to reach them all. Was it worth it? And the other side of it, the real honest side of it is this. Whether it was worth it or not, this was my calling. And I would like to think that my creators will say at the end, well done, George.
We're saying well done for sure.
I appreciate that.
Well, finally now, if Dr. King were looking at where we are today in America, do you think he would say it was worth it to him?
He would say, there's still more work to be done. Let us not just celebrate or punish or do whatever we're going to do with the bad actors and praise the good actors. He said, there's still much more to be done. Let's get on with doing it for the marginalized people. Let's do it for the people whose pictures aren't on anybody's dresser. Let's do it for all of them. Let's do it for the rich, the poor, the black, the brown, the red, and all of the colors in between. Let's do it for the children who can run and talk and sing and dance and those who wish they could and can't. Let's do it for the children who were born of rape and those who were born out of rapture, because all of these are our children. And the work that we do is for our children. Let's do it well. Let's do it whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, because that's what responsive individuals do. Let's do it for Christians, Protestants, Jews, atheists, all of the individuals, and that's what you do because it's still the children. Was it worth it? Yeah. I want to believe that I was given one gift, and I realized that that gift really wasn't for me. It was for other people, and I passed it on. I gave it, and there was no thank you that needed to be done. I think I lived a life similar to Gandhi's and King and Malcolm. At each of their funerals, there were people who were crying and sad, and they didn't know them. And a reporter would ask them, why are you crying and sad about George gone? Did you know him well? And they'll say, no. But you seem to have loved him. And they say, yes. Why do you love him? Because he loved us first. I've tried to love them first. And that didn't require any thank you because that's my work.
So that surely would be following in the pattern of Jesus, no question about it. So on a personal note, I just want to thank you for all of your sacrifices that paved the way for so many of us, including me. And I thank you for always being so generous with your time and your wisdom. I thank you for just being you. You're one of my favorite people on earth. And finally, on behalf of President Heath Thomas, the OBU president, and all of us at OBU, thank you so much for visiting with me today. So, Dr. Henderson, we have a gift for you today. This is a thank you to you from OBU, and that's a personal note from President Thomas, and we hope you'll enjoy it. We certainly have enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.